Salutations Rangers, General Bradley 101, back again with some more lore. And today's Warhammer 40k lore video, ladies and gentlemen, we're back with a bit more of a theory, speculation type thing, as we are taking a look at the Dark Angels, the vaunted First Legion and the Sons of the Lion. Speaking of the Lion, big ol' Mr. Lionel Johnson is back in 40k and he's laying bitches and giving stitches, baby. But with all the recent events of the Dark Angels Lords, we also know that the Lion is the only old Dark Angel back in business, as Mr. Luthor is also kicking about, and he's actually free. So then that begs the question, what exactly is Luthor doing, and what does the future of the Dark Angels and, for the rest of the Imperium hold? Well, we're gonna find that out in this video, or try and find that out in any case. So, strap in and buckle up, and let's get crack-a-lackin' on with today's video. So, where do we stand in the current Warhammer 40k timeframe? The Lion has been woken up, and he's returned to the Imperium. He's met with some of his sons, but more specifically, he's met with the Fallen. And he has decided that he will judge each and every one of his fallen sons, and if he believes them to be fair, true, noble, and honest, they will be reincorporated into the Legion proper. For the fallen shall rise again, and stand alongside their hallowed brethren. And so far that's doing pretty well. The Lion is working on his part of the Imperium and has established what he calls the Lion Protectorate, which isn't necessarily its own kingdom by any stretch of the imagination. It's still very much part of the Imperium, but it's more so space that is directly governed by the Lion, or directly protected. The Lion was always a general, a warrior, not really so much a statesman. So, instead of conquering as he did back in the old days, today he's all about defending and keeping the people of the Imperium safe. And whilst many of the Dark Angels are doing this and there's a slow process about getting used to having their father back in the fold, something interesting happened. Mr. Luthor, who was always a prisoner upon the rock, escaped somehow. And he's said to be doing his own thing. And he's out and about, and he's said to be recruiting Fallen. For what purpose, we don't know. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where we stand, on the precipice of a brand new age with maybe a brand new conflict. As for the first time since the heresy, both the Lion and Luthor are gathering Dark Angels to their cause. So, what does that mean for us in the Warhammer 40k world? Well, we know what the Lion's doing. The Lion has made it abundantly clear. He wants to restore his legion, he wants to bring his boys back into the fold, but more specifically to protect the Imperium. The Lion has had a massive change in character. Whereas in 30k he was all very grumpy, very rude, all about carnage and arrogance and all that. Now in 40k he's very much matured, understanding, someone who realizes his mistakes and understands that to him is not the purpose of a destroyer. To him is the purpose of a protector. He's very much a matured Lion. All the good of the older, younger Lion, but all that bad stuff has been learned and matured and developed. And actually, he's one of my favorite characters in modern day 40k because I love me some character growth. So the Lion wants to re-establish his legion. He wants to bring all of his sons back together and he wants them to be the shield of the Imperium. Hence why he has the Emperor's shield. So that we know. That is simple, that we understand, easy as pie. The thing though, that we have no idea and the true wildcard, as always, is Mr. Luthor. What exactly is Luthor doing? What exactly is Luthor feeling? And is Luthor actually batshit crazy? For those who don't know, Luthor was plugged in the hold of the rock for over 10,000 years to be interrogated by the various interrogator chaplains, and we don't really know if he's fully sane, because he may just be batshit crazy. Because there are references of him rambling on and on and on again about the Lion coming and forgiving him, about him trying to restore the Dark Angels Legion, etc, so on and so forth. But it's still never been confirmed if he was actually sane in his ramblings, whether there was some type of psychic provision, or he was just fucking batshit crazy. But he's out and about now, so which means sooner or later we're going to see exactly what's going on. So generally speaking, we can divide this into about 3 separate categories. So, the first theory goes as follows. Luthor reunites the Fallen, and he's kinda crazy. So this is basically the worst case scenario, and the most bland, I guess you could say, because it's pretty kind of similar to what we got in the previous Horus Heresy. Luthor reunites all of the Fallen and he essentially just goes crazy. He decides that the only way the Lion will forgive him is to restore the Imperium, and to restore the Imperium, it means to destroy it in its current form. Basically, he gathers up all of the Fallen and then we have the classic Dark Angels Civil War 2.0. But this time it's led by maddened angels, driven by grief and fear of damnation. They are not doing this out of spite. They're not doing this out of sense of betrayal, nor do they have any higher goals. They are simply men who have been driven to the point of absolute breaking, and led by a madman who led them into damnation to begin with. Their one chance at being redeemed is to destroy what evil has crept in their place. For no longer is there the truth of science and of reason, but there is a speculation of misguided faith and the trappings of religion. So, Luthor, cooked as all hell, sees that the only way for him to gain the Lion's favor is to restore the Imperium, and to restore it by destroying it. And, as we mentioned before, the Lion's whole shtick is that he's like, hey, I'm here to protect the Imperium. and seeing his wayward sons commit all this bullshit yet again, we know exactly what he's going to do. Though, unlike in 30k, he's definitely going to feel bad about this, and that would then result in a Dark Angel civil war. Now there's two ways that this could be handled. The short way and the long way. The short way is pretty simple, we have a series of books about it, probably 2 or 3, and there's one giant big battle between both the Dark Angels, and it's just resolved in one battle. Most of the Fallen are killed, as well as Luther, and any of those who are not are inducted into the Dark Angels Legion proper as the Risen. And then from there, the Lion will continue his duties in the Lion Protectorate with the Dark Angels Legion as its head. Pretty quick, pretty simple, and it could work, but it's just like, how do you resolve something like that? It really depends on the interaction between Luther and the Lion, so could work out, might not be, it really depends on how those books are written. We then have option 2. That being that there is a long war, or another long war, if you want to say. So the way that this goes is simply put that there is indeed an initial clash, but the Lion doesn't manage to deliver that killing blow. Luther lives on, several other fallen angels lives on, and the Dark Angels Legion begins to splinter. This would be the worst case scenario for the Dark Angels, because the current normal modern day 40k Dark Angels are already super suspicious of the quote-unquote Risen. If you were to have a fallen faction that was loyal to Luther as well as the Risen loyal to the Lion, this would be a breeding ground for mistrust as well as betrayal, treachery, and all types of drama. Essentially, we would have a type of Alpha Legion situation, in which case individual Astartes did not know who they could trust, they did not know who would betray them, and they did not know who they could count on. This would actually end up seeing the Dark Angels Legion fractured severely, and actually it would be the exact opposite of what the Lion wants. The Lion wants a reunited, unified Legion to stand defiant with him, but now he's getting several different factions. I can imagine you could have the main Dark Angels faction led by the Lion and say Azrael, who would side with him, but then you could have a super hyper-religious, just really cooked faction under say Asmodai. We know for a fact that the Lion dislikes the whole interrogated chaplains and how his sons have basically turned into the Unforgiven. He really does not like that. So we could have a faction of super hardcore loyalists loyal to Asmodai. Then we could have the Risen as their own faction, that being the Reborn Fallen. And then we could have Luther with his own faction, and then maybe there's a faction within the Fallen. There's Luther reading the Loyalists who want to be redeemed, but then there's also another faction led by those who were actually drawn to chaos. And we get this series of splintered loyalties as well as just a diverse story, really just changing the Dark Angels Legion. It will really bring it from a sense of 40k, which is pretty safe and secure, into more of 30k in which no one knows anything. There is no such thing as the Dark Angels chapter, there are just many different chapters that bear the same heraldry. And we could even have a case of like individual chapters begin aligning themselves with individual goals, and it becomes so much more expansive in terms of the sheer breadth and width that we have it. Yes, you have the traitors and the loyalists fighting, but then you have internal conflict within the loyalists and the traitors division at the same time. If GW was going to do this, they really are going to have to lean into that whole political aspect of it. It's a give and take, a balancing act between two opposing forces. If they don't, it's just going to end up being another thing that just turns out lame. Good idea, good premise, but ultimately it's just not that cup of tea. But this is the worst case scenario for the Dark Angels in terms of the actual lore. It could work, and I actually wouldn't mind it that much. Again, I like the whole idea of the factionalism between the two. I feel like it really could work. But again, it has to be done well, and GW has to actually keep going with it. You can't just do a book series and then forget about it 10 years later. But then that moves us on to option number 2. That being Luther gathering the Fallen, and then the Fallen having a split fracture. So we know for a fact that the Lion is interviewing each of his sons personally. Everyone who was a Fallen, he has a chat with them and he sees, are you okay, are you good, or are you chaos ridden? Are you actually repentant, or are you just a piece of shit? And we know for a fact that whilst many Fallen are indeed true Dark Angels loyal to the cause, there are indeed those who have fallen to chaos, and the Lion has had to execute them because of it. So let's say we have Luther. Luther hasn't lost his mind, or he has, but he's still relatively intact mentally. But regardless of how, if, when, where, why, Luther does not decide to make jihad upon the Imperium. His goal is simply to gather all of the Fallen and get them to go to the Lion and repent. Right, that's the whole goal, end of story. But while Luther and many of the Fallen associated there do indeed believe that, there's a good chunk who actually fell to chaos. They want to be chaotic, they want evil, they want all that bad stuff, so what do? They then wait for Luther and the Lion to get together, for the Dark Angels and the Fallen and the Risen to come together, and then they decide that the best way to get into the good graces of chaos properly is to actually kill Luther and the Lion, or try and hurt the Dark Angels in some way, shape or form. They launch an attack, and they're semi-successful. The Lion is not going to be hurt or damaged in any way, shape or form. He just came back. If GW does that whole nonsense where he gets put into sleep again, you know, rubbish. Beyond rubbish. Not going to happen. But we have Luther and we have Azrael. These are two very key important figures, and their deaths could really turn the tide for the relationships between the Fallen and the Risen. Azrael is basically all for the Dark Angel's plans. He believes in Lion, he trusts in Lion, and he is there to help the Lion out. He understands that his boy is a little crazy, and he's definitely one of the more level-headed voices of reason within the Dark Angels. If he gives his life protecting the Lion from the Fallen, that means that a bunch of Dark Angels who were in the middle ground, who were just deciding, will 150% be turned to people like Asmodai, those who were super fanatical and really crazy. And vice versa, we then have Luther. Luther, in this scenario, is relatively insane. He's able to gather the Fallen together, and he's able to be that voice of reason. If Luther dies, that means that a big character who's very important to the Fallen is dead. And in combination with the fact that Azrael died with him, this means that two of the most reasoning voices on both sides of the aisles are now gone. It means that there is no room for compromise, there is only room for radicalization. Meaning that we could get three different Dark Angel factions. The Chaotic Fallen, those who have truly fallen to chaos and serve the War Master as well as the four Chaos Gods. The Dark Angels proper with the Risen led by the Lion. Basically, anyone who is tired of being a renegade who was never service to chaos and fully believes in the Lion and restoring the Dark Angels and removing the title of the Unforgiven would then come together in one solid group, and they would form the new First Legion. But then with the third faction, we then have a renegade Dark Angel faction, that being the Fallen. Those who don't really trust the Dark Angels at this instant, and those who want chaotic. This would be the smallest of the group, but they still would exist in some random capacity. So they would go out and do their own thing, trying to find their place in this Imperium and decide whether or not they would be. Now, the difference between this scenario and the first scenario is that it's far less splintered. The Chaos Fallen and the Renegade Fallen are a very small minority when compared to the majority of the Dark Angels Legion. The real kicker that happens here is that who dies during that conflict. Again, with the death of Luther and with the death of Azrael, these are two very important figures in their own respective factions. This means that the Lion has lost not only very important lieutenants, but he's lost figures that are able to broker support and provide more of a balanced take. This then leaves us with a Lion with a lot more to do on his own and with a lot less lieutenants to help him do it. In this scenario, the Lion would be focusing far more in terms of like a PR role. He would be playing the diplomat, the peacemaker, trying to balance out the internal divisions within the Legion, also while trying to maintain the external divisions between the Imperium and the wider Dark Angels. Because again, you would have the chaotic Dark Angels and the fallen Dark Angels, the Renegade faction that is, doing their own thing and the Lion having to answer for it. If to no one else other than Gilliman. But regardless, this means that the Lion's duties jump from being solely a warrior to now being an eternal diplomat. He's going to have to sit down and give this a good old think. He's going to have to measure out his responses and make sure that his legion truly does stay a legion. Because unlike the first example, when his legion has like splintered and fractured, here his legion is still relatively whole. It's hurt, but it's still whole. But he has to be the one keeping it together. He needs to try and teach his boys all the things that they lost throughout the 10,000 years that he was gone. He needs to take control and actually make sure that his legion is a legion. They act as a legion, they operate as a legion, everything is together. And despite the outside influences from those two forces, it's him that needs to put the glue together. This would create a very different type of scenario. It would still be rather political centric, but a different kind of political centric. Unlike the first example, this is far less of individual factions fighting against each other for their own independent glory and wants. This is much more the case of an internalized factional politics, in which the Dark Angels are still the Dark Angels and each one of the factions are still Dark Angels. But what they want and how they want to pursue their goal differs. Same goal, different paths. And you leave the Lion having to balance it all out, all the while with the interference from those other two factions, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And this also adds a different layer of it, because now the lines are a little blurry. No one really knows where the other two factions stand in relation to the Dark Angels, and that includes the wider Imperium and Gilliman. The Lion is really happy to see Gilliman, and vice versa, and they seem to be relatively better in their relationship than they were in 30k, but Bobby G is going to want answers because he's Bobby G, and we don't know if the Lion's going to be so keen to give him up, especially about his boys, which then, whether they want it or not, will create conflict along that line. So it's similar, but it's a whole different take. Honestly, I could see this working as well. I don't know how well it would work though as much as the first option, because again, there are elements of the second option that you can just blend into the first. I think this is the weakest of the two options in my opinion, but it's still possible and some people may prefer it. But now we move on to our third and our final option. Let's take a look at theory number 3, a legion restored. In this theory, Luther gathers up the fallen, but he gathers up the Fallen for a reason. In this case, he only gathers up those whom he can trust. Any and all chaotic Fallen just simply become regular old Chaos Marines, and he gathers those who truly want to repent. How would he do that? He's the Lord of the Fallen, he's able to discern. Let's go with that, right? But he doesn't go directly to the Lion. He then decides that he needs to earn something. He needs to earn the redemption that the Lion has given them. He cannot just go there empty-handed. So, he decides to do something. Gathering up the few hundred or few thousand Space Marines that are still here, he then launches an attack on a Chaos thing. Now this could be literally anything. It could be him trying to kill a Demon Prince, recover an important world, or anything. But let's go with something that has a bit more meaning here. Let's say that he decides to reclaim a lost holding of the Dark Angels. Whilst Caliban was indeed lost, it wasn't the only thing that was lost in the major warp storm. So maybe what Luther decides to do is that he decides to take his boys and go and find something that was lost. Whether it be a relic from Caliban, whether it be a world from Caliban, or something. And it is heavily guarded by chaotic forces and a champion of chaos. Luther and his boys would descend upon that world. They would fight tooth, nail, blood, claw, and everything in between to get back this relic to prove to their father that their words are not hollow and that their forgiveness is truly sincere. They would fight and they would fight and they would fight, but at the end of the day, 5,000 Space Marines may be a lot, but it's just too much for what this demon world has, for what this demon Chaos Lord has. It's too much. They become surrounded, and Luther believes that this is how they will die. But he accepts it, because at least like this he can die as a risen, as a redeemed. Someone who fought for his honor, rather than fought against it as a traitor. And at that moment, the heavens would open up, and the Lion would descend, his legion no longer clad in green, but in the old black of the Legion. The full might of the Unforgiven would arrive. Every single chapter, all sons of the Lion, bearing their heraldry of their chapters, landing upon the earth and assisting their fallen brethren. From there, it would be the case that the Lion would lead this battle and he would destroy and rend asunder any and all who would sin oppose him. He and his boys would conquer this world, and they would slay the Demon Chaos Champion. From there, he would restore every surviving Fallen back into the Legion proper, and this would become the new base of the Dark Angels Legion reborn, no longer Unforgiven, no longer Fallen, but all of them risen in the name of the Lion. This would be a really nice way to restore the Legion as a whole, and in my opinion, this is the best outcome for the Dark Angels because they're all reunited as one Legion. The easiest way to reunite groups of warriors and forge a bond who will actually care about each other is through combat, because it's really hard to hate somebody who bled for you and who you fought next to. So doing this, Lion would be able to restore his Legion fully, not only in name but in actual purpose, to actually have them feel like a Legion again. And during this exchange, Luther would earn his redemption. He would be the one to slay the Chaos Lord or the Demon Lord, whoever it may be, but it would cost him his life. And as Luther lays dying, the Lion would grant him his redemption and Luther would pass as the first captain of the new Dark Angels Legion. Now, you might be asking, okay Brad, in number 2, Luther dying was a big bad thing, why here is it accepted? Number 1, the factions of the Fallen were already divided in theory number 2, so Luther was much more needed. But here all the Dark Angels are reunited under the banner of battle. Not to mention, Luther dying in this way would actually be a meaningful conclusion to his story, and all of the Fallen would already be united for him, so there's a lot less need for him to be a diplomat. But again, for the main point, Luther dying gives a good end to his story. He redeems his fallen brethren and he makes up with the Lion, and he truly shows with his own blood that he meant what he said. And the Lion, seeing what Luther has done, truly does indeed forgive him, and he would honor him amongst the blessed dead of the Dark Angels Legion, and the Legion would be restored properly. It would be a whole new force, the true Legion underneath the Lion to guard the Lion's protectorate. And they would be the shield of the Imperium's people, and the hammer of death to her enemies. And I feel like when it comes to this whole aspect of it, some people may deride it as it's a bit too happy-endy, but I don't really think so. I feel like this would be the perfect end for the Dark Angels Legion story. This would be a good conclusion to the arc. We now know that there are only the good Dark Angels who remain. Everyone else who was a Fallen but did not follow Luther chose to be chaotic, and the new Legion may be restored as something that is meant to defend and to protect. Something wholly, uniquely, and utterly different, but still harkening back to the same old stuff of what the old legions were supposed to be. It would also strengthen the Lion's resolve. The Lion is still trying to find his feet, so this act of bringing his legion together and seeing his old friend, his mentor, his old father and first captain dying for him to restore his legion in the hopes of being redeemed, it would strengthen his resolve to a point of the Lion now knows why he's doing this. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The Lion knows, and the Lion is good to go. I really think that it would bring the Dark Angel story full circle. And you have a legion that is reunited. Yes, there would still be some distinctions between the Risen and the Fallen and the Unforgiven, but they are united under one banner now. They have a martyr to rally around. It gives them a reason to be reunited. And again, it fits in the story really well in my opinion. Now some people would argue, okay, having a full legion back in 40k doesn't make any sense, would they? Well, that's a whole nother different story. The Lion does want to reunite his legion in some manner. Now, whether exactly every single legion would agree with it, that's one story or another. But we know for a fact that every legion that would have fought with him on that planet with the Fallen, a new bond would have been forged. And that bond would be something that could not be broken by mere superstition or parody or insecurity. So whether or not the Lion restoring the legion is what you would like personally, I feel like ultimately, of the three choices, this is the best way for them to come together. And I feel like it could really recreate some of that emotion that you get in the Horus Heresy. And actually deliver something that is, as I said before, different but still familiar. It's a new legion for a new age, and it would really harken onto some back of those old tones, but giving it a fresh spin on it. But ultimately, that's my opinion. But regardless of which option it is, whether it's none of these options, the Dark Angels will be the Unforgiven no more. But whether they will be the Risen, or whether they shall fall even further, only time will tell. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I do hope you guys appreciate it and love this little episode. Let me know down below what you guys think about all my theories. Which one do you like personally? 1, 2, or 3? Which one do you think is the best? Which one do you think is the worst? Or think none of them make any lick of sense? But I say a massive thank you to you guys for watching, and even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Big shout out to my Officer Corps with Mr. Eddie V3, Mr. Major of the Void. Shout out to my Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Warsmith Fireheart, Mr. Corns Butcher, Mr. Bulwin, Mr. Sean IRL 7, and Matthew Merrill. Big shout out to my Corporal tier members, Tremail the Math Kitty, Mr. Lord Rosarius, Mr. Tech Priest Toaster, and Shauna Smithers. And finally, but certainly not least, massive thank you to my private tier members, Mr. Thomas Moslons, Mr. Ivan_SVW, Mr. Hattori's Curse, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Hayeda, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. General Alexander, and Mr. Fortus Unum. Thank you, each and every one of you, from the bottom of my heart. It means the absolute world to me that you guys do this. So sign up today with our memberships. You gain a bunch of awesome benefits, early access to these videos, behind the scenes stuff, a hand in making this channel run, and my love and support. But remember, this will always be free, so whether you give your boy a dollar or not, I will love you just the same. Mwah! Yes, I will. But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, amazing people. Thank you all so very much for watching. I should say hello there, boys and girls. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss Rangers. I know I'm just going to get somebody who's going to say this whole video idea is bunk. Like, it's called a theory. What more do you want me to do?